All right, everybody, we are back again for another episode of the Coach's Compass. Again, don't remember what episode it is because we just continue to roll. We just continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. It's your boy, Coach Coop, reporting live from the US of A. My boy, Coach Jay, could not be with us here tonight just because he's traveling, because he's still playing. Again, I'm on retirement tour. I'm fully good. I got plenty of time now. Jay is getting on ready for his last season. So remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button down below so we can continue to have this thing grow and continue to have on cool guests from all across the world. We got our boy, Coach Ryan, here with us tonight. He is a founder of BSF Pitching Performance, establishing all Bo Jackson's elite sports domes, a routine performance system. He does in-house and remote training. Coach Ryan, thank you for being here with us today, and welcome, my brother.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to join and, get our information, get our knowledge out there, connect, help other people grow, spread the good word. Just trying to impact as many lives, change as many lives as possible. We have really high standards and values here. Surround myself with a good team, man. So I love taking the nights on a Friday to help people, man.
I love it, man. And you already have like a pretty dominant name that's you're where you're working in. Bo Jackson's Elite Sports Domes, right? Like many, especially for our European listeners, and the baseball is like a new thing, kind of a niche, but they still play it over there. What got you into this industry? Like, what got you started in this field, and what made you want to be, strictly down the niche of staying with baseball training?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been a journey for myself personally. I was a really highly recruited athlete. Like in high school, I played a lot, through the high school, and I had a freakish injury called thoracic outlet, and so that changed my entire career. And honestly, like the path that I'm doing now, like I can dive deep into that story and like overall, but I think when I had that issue with the surgery, it led me to certain paths that has allowed me to learn, grow, and inspire others through a process that I've went through personally, which was thoracic outlet. And it was a surgery. It was an injury that wasn't as popular or known. Back in 2017, it was starting to become common in the baseball world. So I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to name these guys, but like Matt Harvey or Steven Strasburg, those guys had, thoracic outlet issues, and they had previous injuries. But the thoracic outlet is where you have this first rib and you got your clavicle, and in between that gap, that's where your blood vessels and nerves flow. And some guys either can break and fracture that first rib due to all like rotational impact forces. Sometimes it gets compressed due to the tightness from overcompensating. There's just a lot of different issues that occurs if even how you were born from an anatomical position. Sometimes people's first ribs are more elevated, and those are normally sometimes maybe the people that are positioned more vertically down in the womb. So it elevates it, which was my issue. But, in high school, I was a two-way. So played the outfield and I pitched from the left side, really successful two-way. There was times struggled with some command things and pitching, but I was learning how to develop myself into more of a pitcher than just thrower because I was also a two-way. And so, I learned a lot of skill sets, developing those skills to playing at a Division I school, which takes me kind of like reversing back to like my story, because in high school, right, like I was getting recruited by some big schools and some really, really good JUCOs in the area. And, then in one game, I swung on an outside pitch and I heard something pop. And I'm like, man, what is that? And I thought it was my scapula. And I remember like when I hit that ball, I was like out of breath completely. Like it felt like I got like shot. I'm like, I can't like breathe. That was really weird. I saw like 6 different doctors, was misdiagnosed by, just like I had a doctor literally Googling things like what it could be. One asked me what my pain tolerance was. It was a really complicated like process because they just couldn't figure it out. And after seeing the third doctor, it just took to get a simple x-ray. And they're like, oh yeah, you got a first broken rib. Just let it heal and it'll do its thing. But not understanding like as an overhead athlete and throwing, right? That plays a huge role in like your upward rotation of the scapula and just this area in general, and rotating and swinging and things like that. And so just tell me to heal. And I was like, yeah, sure. But a lot of the scar tissue started building up. So I had to miss my senior year of high school ball. And then I ended up resting in the spring just to play in the summer, right? Just to play in the summer to showcase still a little bit what I had, because we couldn't figure out this whole injury because during that time of the injury, the scar tissue building up and that first rib break, and it started to, what was happening was, the gap was starting to get closed down neurologically from a neural issue perspective and a vascular. Through the summers, I was able to still showcase a little bit what I had. I had Morehead State come out and watch me. I went to one of their camps. So I was still at 87, even that was after that first rib thoracic outlet issue. And as I kept putting on more volume and stuff, like, I was getting better. I was getting better looks. I decided to go with the school that I was able to two-way still because I wasn't yet ready to get off the bat. I went to Coppin State in Baltimore. So I played up in Coppin State. I started in a lot, like 70% of our games as a freshman, as a two-way. I actually hit in the outfield and played and hit more than I did pitch. But that was because we had a very good veteran staff on that year, and they just needed a left-handed hitter skill set. But that when I went there and stuff, like as the volume and the demand that the game places on you at those higher levels, especially being a two-way, I started to really get like the serious side effects of this first rib being broke. And so over the course of that time, when I was playing, I had to miss my last 2 weeks of conference play when I was with Coppin State, so which led me not to play in a good chunk of games because during that time, like I'd pitch, arm go just limp, just completely dead. And like, I think I just blew it out. That's how seriously, it was such a weird because what was happening, and this is later what found out of one of our PTs on staff, which shout out to her. I mean, incredible lady. She found out that in an overhead position, I didn't have a radial pulse. And so that's what led them into understanding like this isn't right. And they knew the history of the first and broke rib. So I saw Bobby, he's with Impact Sports out there. I mean, shout out to that guy too. Fantastic individual. He's really educated and smart. So I started to learn a lot of the PT side of things from him, asking him good questions and just everything that he does. But he knew like he needed to get my upper rotation, my serratus stronger, low, mid trap, turning on this trap because the trap is actually the biggest muscle that upperly rotates the scap. So he did a lot of that stuff that I got to learn because of the thoracic outlet stuff. And so, because it broke, there was the option of just, hey, we got to do PT. Let's see if we can open that space up, get that flow back, because that's what you can do. You can help decompress that area. If it's so ugly, you can help decompress and form at least a better structure, right? But because of the scar tissue, just a lot of stuff built up from that rib breaking, and the doctors back in those days telling me, hey, just let it heal, not giving me full insight on what this could potentially do to baseball players. And that was the unknown, if per se, and that was kind of scary because didn't know what was happening. My arm was going numb. Be honest, struggle with control issues because it affects you neurologically in the way you're able to, what we call in biomechanics, finding your path of least resistance. It was always me fighting resistance due to an injury that didn't understand the effects until I started diving deep into the science, the structure, the anatomy, the internal performance, the external performance, and how that really blends in the human movement system, mechanics. However, understanding the severity of that injury, when I'm looking back then, at the college, right, they're like, all right, you need to go see a John Hopkins hand surgeon. I'm like, all right. So I went there, did all the tests. Yeah. Same thing. Hands were, turning color drastically. And he goes, how long have you had this first broken rib for? And I go, a couple of years since that injury in high school. He's like, man, all right, well, this isn't necessarily the best situation, could potentially be life-threatening because of the gap of that blood vessel being compressed. And so that was in October of, I want to say 2022. No, that'd be 2020 because then COVID hit in the surgery. So yeah, 2020, COVID hit. Not 22. That's 2 years, man.
They all start to blend together.
So I can't believe it's already been that long. 4 years since. So yeah, that was in October, and then they were like, "We got to put you underneath the surgery now." The time that I could get in to see Dr. Skelly at Rush, shout out to him, great dude. But they did that in early January, and I think COVID hit. So because I had to get that in the surgery, the John Hopkins hand surgery, I had to tell my coach and my staff and just everything like about that. And, they let me go and they dropped my scholarship, and they didn't hold a roster spot for me because that's just how it goes sometimes. And that was a pretty hard pill to swallow. So that was pretty difficult to hear because they actually invested a lot into me there. And that it was a difficult time, like, not gonna lie. So during that time, like, I had to sit on a couch for 6 months, like, not doing anything because my whole left side was just numb. So during the surgery, they had to insert an incision right here to decompress that rib, shave my scalene muscles, which is your secondary respiratories, shave those off, take a little bit of the shoulder, and then release the collarbone, grab that rib. And then they noticed that the nerve was also, like, I believe they said that it was like running through some shoulder muscle, if I'm not mistaken. And so, they had to do structural damage to the shoulder complex. So that was really difficult. So obviously, even still from that surgery that was done to me, it was still a difficult process after with the rehabbing. And that's kind of where I traveled, and I traveled around a lot of places around the world and learned a lot about, after this PT cycle, like, what's next. And, I stayed in contact with many guys like Bobby with Impact Sports, like, through that process, and just all that, it led me to try to become the best player possible. So I had a whole gap year. So, I had to go to a local junior college just to keep doing my spring classes and just building up. But we were also in COVID during that time when things were shut down and didn't have facilities. So everything had to been done remote at home. And I had to make the most of it. And so, but I still traveled and learned. And, after that surgery, I remember after proper time to building up, which was, 9-10 months worth of, building up, I dropped all the way down to, 75, 78 miles an hour on the mound. It was bad. So the velocity dropped so down, like, it just was because of the surgery and just the amount of structural damage that was done. It just completely wiped my ability in my central nervous system, that athleticism, almost, in a sense, to find that path of least resistance and allow my body to find proper force, but being strong and having this proper strength to handle the demand that the forces of gravity places on you on the mound as a pitcher when you throw. And having thoracic outlet, it's known to damage your control, your ability to control your body and find consistency in a release. And most are probably listening to this and be like, oh, that's just an excuse, but you won't know till you go through it. And so, and how I look at that is it was very hard mentally to understand, like, why am I missing arm side? Why am I missing glove side? Things like that. That led me to do the research, to travel, to train, to understand my body, so going from 75, 78, topping 79 to traveling and training around the world. And I was able to, prove myself that I was, hit 89 up to 90 plus, and learning that ability to optimize your body, your system, and understanding internal and external performance. And that's why I do a great amount of investment and learning from Dr. Jordan Shallow with Prescript. His understanding of biomechanics is out of this world, and listening to the insights on what new research is telling us about is really important. So that whole entire process of learning and just traveling and training, allowed me to have my own story, my own success. So, after COVID, I was able to then commit to Charleston, University of Charleston, West Virginia, really solid school. They were a powerhouse D2. They were good. We were really good. I mean, we had 5-6 guys on that team, maybe even staff, that went on to play at the next level. I mean, we had really good guys. It was a great environment. The school, itself, the education, it was good. I mean, it was very competitive. And I actually studied special education in school, as I wanted to be a teacher and a coach, and my dad's a principal, so I help out with special education and stuff like that. And that's what I thought I wanted to do. But as I was going through this process still of, after the surgery, training, rehabbing, going through the ups and downs, more failures than success, to be honest, after that surgery. A lot of humbling moments, but was still able to compete. And, in the University of Charleston, it challenged me. I'll tell you that. It challenged me. It pushed me to become a better player because, coming from a D1 school to going to a D2, right? Us younger, age guys, there's an ego issue with that. And I think you got to address that. And it made me have such a bigger perspective on talent is across the board. It ain't going to matter where you're at. But it pushed me to surround myself with the best guys there. One of them being my performance coach, Caleb Rush. Shout out to him. He's going to be playing professional ball, hopefully in Australia this year, but he got done playing the professional league up in Michigan. So yeah, I mean, he's a great guy, but but yeah, so like Charleston was great. But, even after Charleston, I was, playing a competitive summer league, college environments because I needed to get innings. And then, went on to do some couple tryouts, professional ball. And I decided to turn it down because the time at Charleston was when I started to develop everything through the Bodome in my dorm room, but I wasn't affiliated with them, with the facility and BSF because I actually started my own remote academy in my dorm room. And I first started building a mental health brand called You Matter Too for student athletes for, like motivational stuff, things like that. Built merch, built t-shirts about it, and had a little Instagram account, learned the marketing side of it. I don't know, it just kind of moved me to create something for the time that I had because after the surgery and playing a lot, I was always up and down, like, had to take time off because of the amount of volume that is placed on your arm and body during that. It was, yeah, it's a lot. And so, building back up and having some downtime, I was able to do something, for other people. And then I started to travel and train in the summer and then went to do, entire like, training academy down there in person and stuff like that and built like this page called MPA and training. And, I did that and I just started to grow my name and just the training methods and the things that I've learned along the way, really learn how to build something of my own with my own principles and philosophies and things that I firmly believe in is what started this. So when I was at Charleston, I would commute back and forth on the weekends a few times to meet with the guys and to develop a really good partnership. And I'm extremely blessed for this. It's an amazing opportunity and experience to impact the local community and the kids around here. We've had athletes flying from out of the state, from Canada and California, Florida to come to our metric camps and do our training here. And we got another location in Bensonville, and we're opening one in Columbus, Ohio, mid-August for BSF and everything out there. It's an amazing experience, but that's my story, man. It's a very in-depth like story that I've always wanted to get out there. And I'm blessed to be on here to do that. But I mean, I would say what's awesome is that it's about these kids. I want them to get a better experience and a better system and a better, better methods and better training in the years that matter the most is something I stand very firm on because it was a difficult process. So being a good coach is learning how to relate to them, and learning how to relate to them is probably the best tool that any coach could have out there. And so we do a good job out here. It's such a good environment, but I'm curious on your guys' end, like tell me a little bit about, you guys and what your story is.
Man, that like I'm listening to your story, man, and it doesn't sound far off from like a lot of like what we've gone through, and how we've experienced things too. Like now, the difference for us is that we're mostly like now in Europe, right? So like we were guys that transitioned from America playing here in the college sector and then went over to Europe to play. The biggest thing that we see is just how kids are training and being trained, and then the lack of accessibility to proper training. Because when I can tell you that, I'll say from my side, my first year in Europe was 2017. And I remember the first time I went out there, and our first year was in Denmark, and a lot of the kids that I was coaching and training were trying to train like bodybuilders, right?
Yeah.
Like they were just trying to go in there, be meatheads in the middle of the season. They're lifting as much as they can, and I'm like, man, like you guys have no clue.
Yep.
Like that doesn't translate over, right? And I had just come from playing in Canada and stuff, so I'd been at the professional level. So obviously I had a little bit of a leverage there. But my story goes back to like I was a transfer kid too, right? So I started off. I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. Went to Wake Forest to start off with. Had about 6 different position coaches. Transferred from there to Charlotte. Ended up finishing up my career there. Charlotte was the very first football team there. Had a very, very like the smallest time in the NFL where I was with the Jacksonville Jaguars for rookie minicamp
Nice.
with OTAs. Then I played 3 preseason games with them and got cut. Right.
Mm.
And I think now if I look back into my whole football career, I've had a serious injury that I've never really kind of ever like brought up to where it's been something that's dated back to my high school career. to
Okay.
where I got bad stingers like all the time. So when you talk about like that shoulder issue and stuff, so anytime I turn my head to the right side and I try to make a tackle, right, there's a shooting pain that goes all the way from my neck all the way down to my fingers, right? So I used to be, so I'm a 6'2", I play safety. I'm around, and anytime I play, I'm between 220 to 230, right? So I'm always looked at as like the bigger guy. You always got to lay the wood. And I would do that in high school, right?
Yeah.
But then like after I got a labrum surgery, and then every time I would hit on my right side, like I would get it, right?
Well, I played football my junior senior year, and I mean I played all my life football, and I remember that year when I broke that, and also playing football. Probably not the smartest move, but you know, didn't do
Yeah,
anything. I know yeah, those fingers, man, they hurt.
right, right. So like, and that's been with me my whole career of playing
Okay.
football. You know what I mean? I've never been the guy to go to the doctor. I don't really like to get checked because I don't want to sit out or anything. But that's been something. So a lot of times, like in some games, you'll see me that like I have a horse collar on, and that's just to protect my neck, right? Because that's the
Yeah.
only way I'd be able to play. But even still, like if I do it in a wrong way, like it's gonna happen, and I gotta sit out for a few plays, and then after the game, my arm is completely numb. So that's the
Yeah.
first time I've ever kind of really like shared that, like why there was that limitation on how I played. And not to say that like I should have used as an excuse, but when you have that as an athlete in the back of your mind, this injury that's kind of nagging you and sticking with you, it limits, your
Mhm.
performance. Just like you
Yep.
said, like thinking about that all the time when you're going overhead and not fully knowing. So for me, like I would have loved to know like what was the cause of it and how to get it fixed and whatnot. But also there's the old school in me that just continue to play, just continue to
Yeah.
go through. Like you eventually like your career's gonna be over. Like if you get it looked at, right, there's gonna be a chance that you like might not get a chance to continue to play. So with your story, man, like how do you use what you've gone through and what you've like dealt with in this injury and trying to and letting go of playing baseball, trying to get back to where you're at? How do you use that to help the kids that you're coaching and training?
I think it comes down to structure, right? It comes down to routines. It comes down to providing them a service that incentivizes them. You have to put boundaries. You have to put principles in place if you want to be successful. And when you surround yourself with professional athletes, you see it. But we've developed a culture in America where it's a quick fix mentality, shiny object syndrome mentality. And not to say that, you know, I've experienced with tools and just other things out there that people could say is shiny object, but I think that's the experimenting piece that not a lot of people want to admit that training is experimenting, and that's why research is research. So I mean, what I went through is determination. It's grit. It's the journey, and it's the process. You know, if I would have just, I mean, objectively speaking, if I would have just kept playing, I wouldn't. My path wouldn't be where I'm at now at all. Not at all. So it's really the training. It's the process. But it's having the boundaries within laying it over into the in season, giving them proper guidelines and structure in season. A lot of our guidelines and structures that I've developed within our pitching performance stuff is based on the questions that the athletes ask. If you're a coach and you want to invest in your team, but your players, relatability is hands down one of the most important qualifications for a coach. You have to learn how to relate. You got to ask questions. It shows that you're like, that's why like we created like a 3-day sustainability guideline. Like it incentivizes athletes to communicate with coaches and allow them to understand like, when am I throwing the day before the day? Like, what am I doing, or what am I throwing the day of? When am I throwing? And then when you can learn what day, now you can at least incentivize a 72-hour window frame that prepares them mentally. This is what I got to do the day before, the day of, and the day after. And within their individualized programming, right, our routine system is allowing a certain progression that they have to go through day to day. It provides structure, but within each months, and there's variations to create adaptations to create growth, right? Always constantly changing, loading with strength, loading. And so, you test, you train, you retest, practical application. That's how you connect with athletes. You show their growth, you show their measurements, you show the results. There's a reason why your velocity jumped up, right? Retest your metrics and look at the mass times your acceleration. And there's your physical eyewitness testimony of, look at what my body was capable, it was capable of doing. That's why we test athletes on the Vault technology force plates, right? Like counter movement jump, squat jump, RSI, right? learning how you can get in and out of end range positions, because pitchers are more vulnerable to injury because you get in and out of end range positions more often. And so it's understanding how to find that path of least resistance, but learning how to be stable and strong at those end ranges. That's why, like, there's a problem, in my opinion, with mobility, right? Mobility is a strength through a range of motion, not just a range of motion. And when I ask people to define mobility, they say flexibility. I go, those are two completely separate things. And so if we also understand, and this is a huge principle I stand on, is more mobility without stability creates more vulnerability to injury. And if you don't understand how to take care of your body, but educate yourself on what this stuff is, you'll start to see that the research you spent doing and then the methods and everything that's out there that's accessible, and you can form it into something that you've inherited based on your own path and your own, challenges. Like, you can really, really change careers and outcomes in lives. Think about it. Like, we've had an athlete named Jake Greifenberg, right? He was a left-handed pitcher at Bennett Academy here in Illinois, right? Came to us at 77, 79, topping 80. He was around that range to being up to 88, 89, getting offered by Northwestern. That changes not only his baseball career, but his education, the life after that. I mean, it's a notorious school. Props to him. He put the work in, and it was just dedication. It was consistency, off season and in season. But when you hear that, like, that's when you know, like, relating and building guidelines and building structure, but building things around them and not yourself is probably hands down the most important, because it's what do they need? What do they need at this time? And how can we benefit that? And so that's why we developed such a great culture back there. I mean, the fact that I have another performance coach, Andrew Peters. He played with the Los Angeles Angels and he was with the Chicago Dogs. And, he's back there and he says he loves this environment, right? Because he surrounded himself with not only just high school athletes, college, we get professional athletes in there as well. And it's such a great experience. So to answer your question, that's kind of how I would say, like, the relatability, making it about the athletes, things like that is to me, is the most important. Hands down. But your story is I can see it's similar to mine.
It's very similar, right?
Yeah.
It's just the path that we've gone down. How's it been though to navigate, just the online sector and then creating your own business? Because you talked about being in your dorm and creating this own clothing brand and its own kind of mantra, and then you go into now this sector. Like, how does it been to learn business, navigate the online space, navigate being in person, and then also getting athletes to buy in and kind of also using social media, because that's a big thing nowadays, right? Like, everyone's out there using TikTok, Instagram, all these different types of things, but actually putting out quality content is something that everybody can argue, like, whether somebody is actually doing stuff correctly, right? So how has it been, like, navigating through it all?
Like, if like, are you want more on the business end? You want more on, like, the navigating on, like, on floor training? Like, which?
Talk us through some of the business side, but then also tell us, like, what are some of, like, the key things that you're factoring into your training on the floor side that you're using, and cues that you also use. Because baseball training, I would say, is different than
Yeah.
if you look at football training, right? Like, it's you guys still hit the weight room hard, right? But we're talking about, like, throwing a ball, like you're talking about pitching, like
Yeah.
football. We're just, like, we throw a football, but yeah, we're going out there trying to knock somebody's head off. Like, y'all know it's a little different there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, on the business side, listen, like, when you have a product that speaks for itself, that has the results, that has testimonies, that speaks volume, that impacts the community, that tries to build the best relationships with high schools and other coaches out there, like, actually wanting them to invest and learn. Like, I think on the business side, like, you know, you gotta believe in what you're doing. Like, you got to actually believe the product behind it. Because when people talk about sales and selling and all that stuff that goes into business and what everybody's talking, you can never sell a product that you don't actually believe in. It's impossible. When you do everything with passion, it speaks for itself. So the business side, it's actually more here than it is, honestly, like, what's on paper. Yeah, the on paper is the time, the research, the training, practical application, getting testing. Like, why our metric camps, when we host metric camps, like I said, a lot of those tests are what they do in the MLB draft combine. We had an athlete, Brendan Tunick. he was a remote athlete / hybrid. He'd come in person, got drafted by the LA Dodgers, and a lot of the testing that we did on the ball is what he did in the MLB draft combine. And you have objective data that's sitting there that they use as well. And so connecting that bridge is going to be exciting in the future. And I've had agents sending professional guys here now, and it's like getting those numbers for it's awesome. So I think the business side of things is just, you got to provide a service. You got to provide in what you believe in. The training is kind of what I was just talking about, the metrics, the testing, the proof. And that's why I said, like, what we're trying to develop here is a quarterly assessment, measurement of metrics before and after seasons, finding a pattern, what's happening, what's going on, relating to the numbers, relating to the injury, relating to the fact and the objective, because you have athletes that we preach health first, but they're out on pitching live and there's game changer, 105 pitches, 130. Like, I've seen it happen in a college summer league out here. Had a coach saw it on one of my brother's summer league teams. Kid threw like 136 pitches, and you're not even including the warm-ups. That's almost combined 150. Like, yeah, it was his last year and his last summer ball game, let it eat. But it's just like, what if now you're stuck with medical bills and a freaking torn ligament? It's like, it's not worth it. Like, quality over quantity. Like, when you hear that, that's what's challenging. It's that bridge that we got to develop and connect. That's why I want to develop coaching clinics. I want to develop a system and an educational system that incentivizes also coaches to learn the game, how to workload manage intensity and volume, teaching and understanding more about the awareness that's going on with the culture that we've developed in baseball. It's just, like I said, it's something that we can't keep doing if we want to talk about arm injuries and things that we know from an objective standpoint. When you throw and when you pitch and you exceed more end ranges, which means there's more distraction forces happening at those end ranges. And the more that we throw and we go into layback, which is passive, right? A passive range of motion is what now you're relying on passive connective tissue to withstand that end range and climbing back out of it. So it puts a lot of stress and demand on the tissue, right? How you eccentrically load it and how you concentrically contract tissue, and understanding, like, in those eccentric movements is where all those microtrauma tears happen in the muscle fibers and the tissue. So think about, like, the concept of a bowling ball. You got threads and strings hanging out. You keep that bowling ball hanging there, it's just, you're going to see it fraying. And that's what happens in baseball, because in the training and everything, teach counter movement, like everything, like, like learning how to deviate your center mass, being strong in all triplanar movement patterns, like, because pitching and throwing is a triplanar movement. It's like, those are the things that are going to work to help stabilize those end ranges, but we have to wrap our head around that what we do for our sport and the act of throwing and that violent movement is passive. So meaning it's either you're going to do the training or you're not. Because if you're not, and you think you can just play, you're slowly going to see yourself go down the other way. And it's just, you got to understand, like, because the culture that we're building, there's a lot of specialization. Fine, so be it. I play multiple sports too. I encourage multiple sports, but I also encourage specialization if you're a kid that knows that your skill level is right, because there is two parts of this. This is why biomechanics is so critical, because bio is the internal performance. It's understanding the central nervous system. It's understanding that when you learn and retain information, your prefrontal cortex says, hey, right, I have to process this information. And so when you learn then how to process that information and you're able to execute that, that's genetic potential. So there's a good phrase out there, shout out to Dr. Jordan Shallow. All physical potential is genetic, but not all genetic potential is physical. So there is two sides to the skill of baseball. And that's why baseball always gets the rep of soft in the weight room. But from what I'm concerned, I've seen baseball players power clean 315, like football guys. And so when you're looking at, that's the external performance, right? So when I learn, though, like how to maximize a skill in a set, it's also how you create neurological adaptations. And what we like to implement is a lot of end range isometric contraction work, iso work in general, because it teaches the brain how to send like those, I'm still studying and doing all the research and stuff, but the brain will send those mechanical receptors, tell the muscle to turn on and contract, because muscles stabilize joints. And it helps strengthen that. There's different type of isos. There's end range, overcoming, and yielding, right? And there's, manual resistant, eccentric, different type of movements that trains the tissue quality. Even reactive, like 2-pound med ball, like bouncing on a wall, like reactive type 2 muscle fibers, the quick twitch. So now I'm teaching how to train fascia. So fascia is like the second layer. It's the layer of defense, like for the muscle tendon units and the structure, the muscles, tendons, ligament, bone. And going back to the injury stuff, 12, 13-year-olds, when the specialization starts happening, they're throwing all year round. They're chasing this shiny object accolade and trophy. And I play for this team and I went here and I went there. You find yourself throwing all year round passively in a range of motion that studies show that we have over thousands of pounds of force being applied. And we're one of the most explosive rotational athletes in the laboratory pitching, but there's also that linear component and demand that the body places in the sport of pitching, which is understanding kinematic sequencing, and that's the timing of hip to shoulder separation. And when you hit those end ranges in that movement, there's a lot of torques and there's a lot of distraction forces happening that places fascia in more demand, because if you understand how, and also biomechanics and the functionality of how the body works, like the medial epicondyle, which is the ulnar and the humerus bone where it meets, right? You got the MCL, the medial collateral ligament, the UCL, ulnar collateral ligament, which is the two objective structures that hold this joint, which is a hinge joint, together, flexes, extends, right? So when you're looking at pitching, right, the static position of the shoulder will dictate the positioning and how much rotational torque is being placed on the elbow. And so if look at the culture right now on our computers, phones, hunch, posture is a choice. If you're listening out there, it's a choice. I'm not perfect. I was probably just slouching that whole entire interview, but it's when you're internally rotated in the shoulder and that's how your static position is aligned. When you're going to throw, you have to start supinating this way, but you're going to notice in order for me to flip my humerus, my arm up into horizontal abduction, which optimally for pitches that you're listening to out there, a front foot strike anywhere between 90 and 60 degrees, right? And hold that counter rotation of the trunk, right, is predicated on how the shoulder is positioned as well. But you're going to notice that I have a lot more rotational torque just to flip this wrist to supinate while I flip up. So if I'm all the way out here and I'm trying to flip, there's more rotational torque, and then you're exceeding a passive range of motion. And if you're early trunk rotating, you're going to see the elbow and the arm push in front of the trunk. And you're going to fight a lot of centrifugal forces. And then you're going to be holding supination a lot longer throughout this delivery. And then you're going to see a lot more distraction forces, and you're going to see a lot more fraying of that connective tissue happening in that supinated position. Believe it or not, you can actually tell a lot based on the MRI and a tear of the UCL if how it ruptured. Is it more of a horizontal type of tear or more vertical? If it's more horizontal, it shows that you're probably more of an east to west pitcher, right? So you're probably a guy that misses arm side, glove side, right? More of a two-seam sinker slider guy. But this position and supination, it puts a lot of stress on this elbow. So now think about it. If we know that peak stress happens at end ranges and we climb back out of it, we got to test to see how strong are we also at that mid stance, also at those end ranges. So there's a lot of technicality, there's a lot of skill, but there's a lot of strength and different type of techniques and strength that you got to learn how to master and do dynamically in a movement pattern, in a pattern, in a skill that's actually it's not complicated when you understand the in-depth of training. But for someone that's just trying to learn how to put their bodies in better positions, you first got to start asking, like, why? Like, why can't your body get into that position right now? Why? Right? And then when you start educating the body, you start learning this stuff, that's where you share out the knowledge and the training and the information side. You teach them. You got to educate these kids. And so when you're understanding like how much torque and just how much stuff is going on, there's a lot of issues happening at the structure, right? And that's why you see a lot of growth plate issues with younger athletes. So when you're specializing in that sense, it's like, you got a lot of all year round throwing, and you got a mismanagement of load management. So you're not learning how to manage your intensity, your load, hearing guys throwing back-to-back days. I mean, again, playing professional ball in the World Series, you got to throw back-to-back days, sure shit, I am.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Yeah.
am.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But for a 16U travel game and consolation bracket or whatever, it's like, is it worth it? Seriously? So it's just more of the awareness side of things. But when you're looking at the injury side of things, I mean, it's just gotta learn how to load manage. You just gotta understand that key concept. You gotta test. You gotta show the results. You gotta show before and afters, right? And that's why we're trying to develop a system and a schedule that allows, incentivizes them to come on certain days, get those, metrics in.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I didn't really hear about specialization until a few years ago, and it mostly started in, like you said, in the baseball sector, right? That's when it kind of started that people were specializing, like, I'm just going to be a baseball player, or I was going to do softball. And then it started trickling down to then football, soccer, basketball. And then, now we're trying to tell kids get back to being multi-sport athletes, especially ones that are trying to go to college and help you get more recruited. You used to also say that you do preach a little bit of specialization, just because of, mix and all the stuff that you've learned and researched throughout the years. If you had to look back though at like 15, 16-year-old yourself, knowing what you know now, what would you tell 15, 16-year-old Coach Ryan?
learn how to separate the information of what you learn from when you're on the field. That was my issue. I'll be honest. There's so much, because there's a skill that I had to regain due to the severity of the surgery, the injury, because it completely changed my coordination and movement patterns. Me like trying to hone in and learn how to move my body to the best of its ability every single time. Like I'd be, it was like an obsession. Like, so I would tell my 15, 16-year-old self, like, learn how to separate the information that you're learning, that you're doing the training, you're doing everything here. Learn how to compete. Go in between the white lines, compete. Trust in yourself. Trust the process. Because a lot of confidence is actually, in my opinion, from one outing to the other outing, is the confidence preparation is happening within the training. It's preparing them and incentivizing them to, I got a job to do. If I say what I truly want to say, and how you do one thing is how you do everything, if you want to get to a Division I college, you're going to do everything you can. You even want to go play at a high top 25 D2, JUCO, play pro ball. I mean, try and be the best that you can at it, right? And so that's what I tell my 15, 16-year-old self. Like, it's a lot. And I think social media has created a culture where there's a lot of misuse information, and there's a lot of, like, you got this mobility epidemic. It's like you're looking at all these positions that people are placing them in, but we think as pitchers is always, there is a defining point in having some flexibility, right? Like learn how to train that, but backing it up with the strength training. But like the real mobility and stuff like that is it's a strength through that range of motion. And it's like when you understand from biomechanics, like structure indicates functions, but positions dictate function. So it's understanding that concept too in biomechanics. It's like you can't say get into this position, blah blah blah, if you don't even understand your structure. At least testing what your mobility, what your range is like. Like the fact that like when you're doing a mobility assessment, like if you're taking somebody into like internal rotation, right, and you're looking for around 45 plus, right, and you're at 35, 36, and you're cramping on your glute medius right there, that cramping sensation is like bone on bone. So you're meeting structure, and when you're meeting structure, you're passing its limit. Like, yeah, you can train it, right? Like but again, that more mobility without stability creates that vulnerability. And so that's why, like, when you see kids sitting in a 90-90 pigeon hip stretch, those are the guys that are having the hip flexor strains and the hip labrum issues. And it's because you're now putting your femoral head. So you got your pelvis, you got the acetabulum. So the femoral head would connect to the acetabulum that connects to your femur. Some people have thinner or thicker femoral head. The shape of the structure actually matters. We could sit here and get x-rays of all the athletes, but it's impossible. I mean, there could be a system to get that, right, and to incorporate that, which actually is something I've written down and thought about and doing, is getting x-ray and structure pictures to then proper use it in the sections of the training. That, because it's like if I got a femoral head that's pinching and cramping at 36, 37 degrees of hip internal or even the external, but we're doing a 90-degree bent of the leg, you're taking that femoral head and you're all you're doing is fraying the connective tissue, the passive connective tissue between the femoral head and the acetabulum, right? Because there's the fascia around it, and that's what protects structure. It's just like you got all those muscle tendon units there. And then so when you do rotation, flexion, extension, really quick bursts, more mobility without stability creates vulnerability to injury. There's there's the hip flexor, there's the hamstring, right? The hip flexor was weak, so the hamstring had to extend more to develop the stability in the gait cycle of the compensated hip flexor, because it was tight. Tightness isn't a sign of weakness. Tightness is an expression by the central nervous system that says, hey, I have to tighten up to stabilize for something unstable. And what was unstable was the passive connective, or the passive positions that you're holding your body into. So that's why we like to incorporate a lot of end range, like hip isometric contraction work, like hip stuff. Because as pitchers, even when we're moving down the mound with the slope, you got gravity yanking you down. You go into hip flexion, right? So even when you hit hip flexion, you got to learn how to bounce back out of that end range and learn how to rotate and extend and drive power through the kinetic chain. So if you can't even climb in and out of an end range position because you're hip, because my hips are tight, my hip flexors are weak, or whatever, it's like they're not. You just got to train them right. And so it's understanding like how the movement of the skill relates to the physicality. So that's why creating neurological and physiological adaptations is the key to enhancing human movement performance systems. It's learning how to enhance and raise the skill of the athlete. So now when metrics come into play, that's the difference between taking a guy from 80 to 90. Then the metrics and the in-depth of the details and what you do, management wise, is then how you get guys from 90 to 95, 95 plus, 95 to 100. So it gets very specialized, but it's more teaching discipline. It's teaching the discipline behind this. I mean, it's like I said, I just broke down a lot right there. I probably lost people within that. But that's just some of the things that I've been researching, that I've been trying to learn. I'm trying to keep up with the research and keep learning and keep growing as ends up helping your business. It correlates. The principles in sports and the principles you learn in sports will always transfer to what you do in business. Always. There's that key outlier. That's why sometimes your best coaches are your athletes, especially the athletes I've seen results and gains. I got some of my athletes working my metric camps. Shout out to those boys. They do a hell of a job. They're learning, and they're learning how to execute. I see Tyler Ledvina. He's a left-handed pitcher out here, man. He started with us at 79, 81, topping 82. He beat cancer twice. Trained with us for an entire year. Experimented with some other weightlifting programs for a month or two, but was been with us for mostly a whole year. Hit 92, and he sits 89, 91. And he's committed to one of the best JUCOs in the nation, Heartland, in Division II JUCO, like amazing baseball school. He's committed. He had looks from Illinois, Kentucky. I mean, he had a lot of good looks. This kid beat cancer and completely changed like the way he learned, the way he carried himself, his structures, like what he did on a daily basis, like, his eating, which he's still getting better at, and just everything in general.
Yeah.
And so when we go back to the product and the business and the service, it's that there's stories. I started from a story, so why not make something out of someone? You have to.
I love it.
You got a story. Everybody listening probably has a story or has one coming. You just got to see the opportunities that's ahead.
Now, Coach, before we get out of here, right?
Yeah.
We got our 60-second round, right?
All right.
It's one-word answers, 10 questions all across the board.
Let's do it.
You ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Here we go. 60 seconds on the clock. Favorite post-workout snack?
Ooh, ground beef. Straight ground beef.
Favorite sport?
Baseball.
Dream vacation spot?
Bora Bora.
Guilty pleasure food?
Pizza.
Best concert you ever attended?
Feature Amigos. That was lit.
Favorite movie genre?
Rom-com.
Best gym you've ever been to?
Best gym?
Yeah.
Photo, baby.
Dream car?
Mach 1.
What is your number one flaw as a coach?
Yeah, that was putting me on the spot right there. Another question.
Would you rather be in an octagon with a gorilla, tiger, or a bear?
Tiger.
And that is it, Coach. Hey, we appreciate your time, man. And thank you, man, for coming on and actually sharing the real side of your story and also teaching us a lot more about just the biomechanics and everything that goes to becoming a great baseball coach and what it's like to be a baseball trainer and what it takes to be a great baseball player just all around and even just being a good athlete. So thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Take care. Pleasure to have you on. Glad I was able to help impact and educate people out there.
And we're out.